Hello my friends, it's the Game Boy Geek here. Today, we're going back to 900 AD, where outlying townships are under threat from outsiders. You'll be gathering workers from the city to defend against enemies, building fortifications, and spreading faith throughout the land. But you'll also be getting help by the finest knights that the king sent, which are the Paladins. Paladins of the West Kingdom is for 1 to 4 players, takes 90 to 120 minutes to play, for ages 12 and up, and published by Renegade Game Studios. Today, we'll be doing a rule school, where I'll teach you how to set up and play the game so that you don't have to read the rulebook yourself. Now, I've placed timestamps below me in the description of this video, just in case you want to jump to a specific section of the rules. Well, without further ado, let's get started. Paladins of the West Kingdom is a worker placement game to 1 to 4 players, where each round you'll be helped by one of these paladins that will give you some new workers and some attributes like influence, strength, and faith, which allows you to take other actions more easily, but at the same time unlocking points and getting more benefits. You'll be fortifying, which will give you strength and sometimes points. And as you gain strength, faith, and influence, you'll be gaining points at the end of the game for those. You'll be sending townsfolk out on quests and gaining resources or one-time abilities, or recruiting them for ongoing abilities all game. You'll also be trying to fulfill King's orders to get points at the end of the game. You'll also be attacking different outsiders using your strength and getting one-time use abilities and resources, or you'll be using your faith to convert these outsiders and gaining points at the end of the game for specific goals. So you'll need to manage all your attributes, all your workers, and all your resources wisely to have the most points in many different ways at the end of the game. To set up, you're going to find the 2 parts of the main board. They are rectangles that look like this, and you're essentially going to put them together so the waters match up just like that. This is going to be in the middle of the table where everyone can reach it. Now on the left side of this main board, you're going to take the green townfolks card, you're going to shuffle them, and you're going to draw the top 5 cards and place them just as you see here. Now just to the right of that last townfolks card, you're going to shuffle the wall cards into a face down draw pile right there. And moving just to the right, you're going to place a certain amount of silver in this central area just above the board. Depending on the amount of players, like in this case we're playing with 4 players, we have 8 silver. Now in the upper right hand part of that main board, you're going to place all of the debt on the unpaid side just above this black icon here, matching the color of these cards. And the debt side that's unpaid has these 3 points that are crossed out, meaning you'll lose 3 points for each debt you have at the end of the game. And then, so these don't get shuffled, they're all just with this side up. Then you're going to take these purple suspicion cards, shuffle them up, and place them just above this spot on the board. Now on the very right side of that main board, you're going to take these outsider cards, shuffle the deck up just like this, and you'll place 6 cards from that deck face up under each of these slots on the bottom right hand side of that main board. Then on the left side of the main board, you're going to find these King Order cards that have sort of a red seal there. You're going to shuffle these up and place 3 of them, 1 each face down on the matching spots here. And the cards not placed here from that deck can be placed back in the box. You won't need them this game. You'll do the same thing for these green sealed King's Favor cards. You'll shuffle this deck, and you'll place 5 of them, 1 in each of these slots, face down. And once that's done, the rest of the cards that you didn't use can be placed back in the box. And on the bottom left-hand side of that main board, you can take these Tavern cards, which are face down, shuffle them up and place them in a draw deck just like that. And then off to the side, you're going to make a supply of the different components. We have the silver tokens, the provision tokens, and then all 6 of the different workers in the game. You'll be using the white laborers, the green scouts, the blue merchants, the red fighters, the black clerics, and the purple criminals. When placing the black clerics out, make sure you use the meeple type pieces that match the same shape of all the other workers. Do not use the ones that look like just a head that sit flat like this. These are monks that will be used in just a moment. Now you're going to give each player one of these player boards. Now these boards are double-sided. You're going to want to make sure you use the side that just has a single card on the bottom left-hand corner, not 2 of them. The single side is for multiplayer game. The side that has 2 on there is for the AI for the solo game. So make sure you just have 1 card spot here. Now these card spots are actually going to be a different design for each player board. You're then going to give each player these green workshops These monks, which these are the pieces that I told you not to get confused with the cleric workers that are of the same color earlier, and these red outposts. You're going to place one on each of sort of the boxes there. Then towards the bottom of your player board, you're going to place these jars in ascending order from 0 to 9, left to right. 0, 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, 9. In the bottom left-hand side of the board, on this attribute track, you're going to place the 3 attribute trackers. We have red for strength, black for faith, and blue for influence. Stack them all on 0. Next, you're going to locate these Paladin cards. Now, there's a set of 12 for each player board, and it's going to match the artwork that's in this spot here that we talked about earlier when setting up your player board. Now, for instance, the back side of this has this background. You see this here, this matches this. So this is going to be the background of where all the Paladins are. So my 12 Paladin cards are going to have this artwork in the background of them. Once I have those 12 cards, I'm going to place them in a draw deck like this, shuffle them up, and place them just to the left of my board like that. You're also going to give each player 3 silver and 1 provision. You'll also randomly assign one player this first player marker. Then starting with the last player who's sitting directly to the right of the first player and going counterclockwise, meaning the player that has the start marker will be the last one to do this. Each player is going to recruit one of these green townsfolk and place them to the side of their board, and they don't have to pay anything for it. This is part of the setup. And keep in mind that there's a lightning bolt on some of these in this left side, and this gives you that immediately even during setup. In this case, this player that took the Watchman would get 1 silver. Again, the start player will be the last one to get one of those townsfolk. Any remaining ones will slide all the way to the right in order, and then from the draw deck just to the left of this main board, you'll fill this back up going right to left. So after refilled, it might look something like this. The object of the game is to have the most points at the end, and you'll get points in a multitude of ways, like moving your different attribute markers up the track. You'll be getting points. Points are denoted by these yellow flags as you see here. You'll also get points by placing a certain amount of your workshops. Similarly, by placing a certain amount of monks, outposts, jars, by fortifying a certain amount of walls, and by converting different outsiders, and by completing King's Orders, but we'll talk about all these different ways as the game goes on. The game is played over 7 rounds. Each round has 7 phases that you'll go through. The first one is to pass the start player marker to the next player clockwise, but you do not do this in the first round. The next step is to reveal any King's Order and or King's Favor cards. Now on this main board, this is actually helping you track the different numbers of rounds that you've been through. For example, in round 1, you'll flip this King Order card. Round 2, you'll do this one. Round 3, you'll flip both of those. And as the rounds go on, you'll be flipping different cards, and that will show you that that's the last round of the game, round 7. Now these 3 are the order cards, and they'll get you a certain amount of points at the end of the game if you've fulfilled their conditions. We'll go more over these later. Next, you'll take the deck of the Tavern cards, and you'll flip face up the amount of cards equal to the number of players plus 1. In this case, we're playing a 4-player game, so there's 5 cards face up. Next, each player is going to draw the top 3 cards from their Paladin deck, which remember, every player has their own deck just to the left of their player board. So each player will secretly be able to look at the 3 cards that they've drawn. From those 3 cards, they're going to select one that they're going to use this round, and they'll place it face down right on this spot there. The other 2, one of them, they will place on the top of their deck, meaning they'll see it next round. The other they'll place on the bottom of their deck. Then, starting with the start player and going clockwise, each player will reveal the Paladin card they've selected this round. They'll also collect the 2 workers in the top left. In this case, we have a scout and a laborer. Then that player will select one of these Tavern cards, and they'll collect the 4 workers that are shown there. Like in this case, we would take 2 red, a purple, and a blue. Now you'd either turn this sideways 90 degrees or flip it over, showing that other players cannot take this. Now, anytime you get a purple worker, these are criminals. For each one of those that you take, you must take one of these purple suspicion cards. You'll flip it over, you'll place it to the right side of your player board and keep it there, but you'll get this much silver, either 0, 1, or 2. In this case, it's 2, and you'll take it from the tax supply. Notice that this card, the silver is sort of reddish, like here. So you'll take it from here. So in this case, I'll take 2 from the tax supply. We'll talk a little bit later what happens when this runs out. Now those purple criminals are cool because they actually act as a wild worker. You can use them on any spot that we'll show you later. And so that player now has their worker pool for this round. It would then go to the next player clockwise, and all players would do this. Once all players have done that, we then go to the action phase where everyone is going to be at one at a time taking a single action, placing one or more workers, as I'm about to show you what all these different actions do. Now this is my worker pool here for this round, and essentially on your turn you're going to either place a worker or workers or pass. This will continue till all players have passed. Now this is my worker pool, but I'm going to use other workers to just kind of show you what all the other actions are that you can take. So let's go over some of the more straightforward actions on the left side of the player board. The first one is develop. You have to place 2 workers, and if it's clear like this, you can use workers of any type. So I can maybe put one here, and I can maybe put one like this. Now in this case, we also have to pay 4 silver. Now normally that action costs 4 silver, but my Paladin that I selected this round says developing costs 2 fewer silver. So instead of paying 4, I'll have to pay 2, which I do have because we started with 3. Cool way to use the Paladin in the first round. And you can place one of your workshops on the right side of your player board. Now you see, when I uncover this, it also gives me a worker. So I will take another cleric and place it in my supply immediately. Now if you look at the right side of your player board, the 2 left spots of each of these have a dotted box outline. That means you can place that workshop on any one of these, because normally like this one would cost us 3 different workers, one of any type, 1 scout, and 1 cleric. Now here we could place it, let's say here or here, and this means when we take this action later, we don't have to place a worker here, it's already taken, we just have to place in those 2 spots. By the way, if there was already a worker here, for example, or workers, like maybe we had taken this action a little bit earlier, and you wanted to place that workshop there, you can place it here. You just take the worker that's underneath it and place it back in the supply. Now keep in mind, you're only taking 1 action, then it's the next player's turn. So after we did this develop, it'd be the next player's turn, but I'm just going to run through all the actions. The hunt and trade works similarly. If you want, you can place 1 worker of any type, either here or here, and get what it shows you, a provision or a silver from the supply, and place it there. However, you could place 2 workers, in this case any kind, or a green one and a green one, or any kind and a blue one. Now if you did that, you would get 1, 2, 3 silver, or 1, 2, 3 provisions. Now if you place a single worker on this turn, on a future turn you cannot place another worker here. You either have to put 1 or both the first time you go to either hunt or trade. Now when you recruit, you can send 1 or 2 workers. If you send 1, you have to place it in the left spot. If you place 2, you use any worker here and a red fighter there. You can't place 1 worker here in 1 turn and then in a subsequent turn in the same round, then go here. It's either 1 or 2 the first time you go recruit. Now if you go just here with a worker of any kind, you can essentially go and discard one of the green townsfolk, and because the icon that we just had the worker on looked just like that. So you can discard any one of these. However, you will have to possibly pay some silver. Like this one, we'd have to pay 2 silver to discard it, and if so, we would discard this card and get these 2 workers, for example. And when you discard them, essentially you're sending them off on a quest. Now keep in mind that this does not refill now, it happens at the end of the round. If the first time this round you placed any worker here, and a red worker here, you can then recruit. You don't get to both discard and recruit because you'll notice that there's no plus sign between the 2 actions like there are in the trade and hunt icons just above to the right of this spot. Now let's say the lineup looked like this and we did place both workers. As we said before, we could spend 2 silver to discard, send them off on a quest, and get these 2 workers. And let's say we wanted to recruit this one. When you recruit, you pay, in this case, either 2 silver or a debt card, which we'll talk about in just a moment, and you'll place this alongside your player board. And basically what these mean is when you do this, you get this for the rest of the game. So anytime I place a workshop, like we've already seen, you'll get this type of worker, a laborer in this case. Now when you take a debt, you'll take the unpaid debt here and you'll put it in front of you. If you don't pay this at the end of the game, it will be worth -3 points. There's different ways that you can actually pay the debts. We'll go over some of those later, but when you pay a debt, you'd flip it over to this side, it's paid, and it's going to be worth +1 point at the end of the game. And to reiterate, when you're discarding or recruiting any of the townsfolk on the left 2 spots, you can either pay the silver or take an unpaid debt. Now let's go over the prey action. Now this typically would require a cleric worker that would match that like this, and you'd have to pay 2 silver. However, I just want to remind you and reiterate that the purple workers are criminals, and you had to take suspicion for them, but the good side is they are wild, and you can place them anywhere just like that. So here, we put this here, the 2 silver, and we can remove any workers from any spot. So for example, we can remove these. Now they would go back to the supply, not to us, the general supply. This just opens up the spot so we can go here again this round. And speaking of those purple workers again, you could Conspire, put worker of any type here to gain a purple criminal worker. Again, anytime you take a criminal worker, you must gain suspicion by pulling the card as we showed earlier. And as a reminder, those suspicion cards go to the right side of your board, just like that, face up where everyone can see. Now we're going to go over all the actions on the right side of the player board, and now's a good time to remind you that on your turn, you're simply putting worker or workers to one spot, then it's the next player's turn clockwise, and you continue doing this until all players have passed. So let's first talk about commission. Well, we have a workshop here. Normally this would take a green worker, a worker of any type, and then a cleric here, but we have this workshop here, so it's any worker and a cleric. And if we go there, we get to commission a monk. Now for all of these on the right side, you'll see a color on the left side and a color of the right side. These are either black, blue, or red. And those have to do with the 3 attributes. Remember, red is strength, black is faith, and blue is influence. And depending on where each of those markers are on this track, it tells you how much you have of that. Right now we have 0 of each of them, but if we had this, we essentially would have 4 influence, and that's how these trackers work. And that's important because what this means is on the left side, it's what is basically a requirement, and the right side is what you're going to gain. So in order to do a commission, you're going to need a certain amount of faith to do this action, but you're going to gain influence. Here you're going to need influence to do this, but you're going to gain attack, and so on and so forth. So for this one here, we're going to take a monk. Now, when you take monks up here, you have to take them from left to right, and you're going to have to provision it. So the first 3 are only going to cost you 1, the second 2 are going to cost you 2 provisions, and the last 2 are going to cost you 3. And as you go up and you place these over the different turns, if you end up getting to the end, those are worth points at the end of the game, depending on how far you went. So we're going to do this. Again, we're going to need some faith, but we're going to provision this by placing the workers needed and paying the provision from our supply to the general supply. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Now, when you commission a monk, you can place it on one of the open spots, and you're going to need a certain amount of faith. Like these spots, you don't need any. If you want to go in one of these spots, you need 2 faith, 4 faith for these, and 6, and so on and so forth. And again, that's where your black faith flag is on your attribute chart on the left side of your player board. So here, I don't need any faith to go here. That's cool. Now, some spots you can only go to at certain player counts. Here at 3 or more, here at 4 or more. And they do different things, like, hey, gain a laborer worker, gain 2 silver, remove a suspicion card, recruit one of the green townsfolk cards for free. Let's go here. We're going to get rid of a suspicion. That's cool. You would get this and put it in a discard pile just to the right of the suspicion deck. We'll talk to you more about what suspicion does later. Now, since we took that commission action, we're going to get this as a reward. And as you can see, we go up 1 on the influence attribute. So now we moved up that attribute to 1. Now the next one is Fortify. Again, you need to place all those workers, and you're going to need a certain amount of influence, and you're going to get strength. Now you're going to be building the wall from left to right over here, and remember, you need influence. In this case, we don't need any. Well, we have 1, so that's good. Now, if you're ever short on a specific attribute, the Paladin that you've selected this round has attributes of certain types. So this one has 2 influence and 2 strength. So even if we needed some influence and we didn't have quite enough here, you always add to it this round for what your Paladin supplies. So we always have at least 2 plus whatever we have here. So to fortify, this is the logo of the spot that we went to. So you'll take the top one off the deck here. You'll place it in the leftmost open spot. You can't do them in any order. Again, you have to have 0 influence, which we do, and you have to pay 1 provision. And as you get the walls go further and further, you'll have to spend more provision and things like this. This will have us go up 1 on the strength attribute. The red flag will go up 1 on your attribute track, and this will be worth 2 points at the end of the game. And again, anytime you update those attributes, you're going to be moving them on this track. Now going to the Garrison spot, again, you're going to need these 3 workers, and then you're going to need a certain amount of strength, but you're going to gain faith. And when you do this, you're going to take the outpost that's just above these, and you're going to gain 1 attribute of faith that you'll move up on that track. And again, as you place these, when you get further and further, you can get points at the end of the game. And when you place them on the main board, again, before when we commissioned the monks, you'd be looking at faith, but now we're putting the outposts there. We look at the red, which is the strength. Now we had 1 strength and our paladin gave us 2. So we could actually go to this 3 spot here. Again, making sure you're playing with the right player counts to go to one of these spots, but you could just do what those spots say. In this case, like here, gain 2 silver, for example. Then when you take the Absolve action, you'll need to, again, place these 3 workers, and you're going to need a certain amount of influence, but you're going to gain faith. And so here, you'll also have to pay silver. For this one, we don't need any influence, 0, but we have to pay a silver. We place this over here into any of these spots and gain the reward. Maybe get a laborer. Now, we talked about debts earlier in the game, and there's different ways to pay debts. There's lots of these spaces on the main board in here that when you go there, it allows you to flip a debt card to paid. So if you do that, if this was in front of you, you could then flip it, and that's going to go from -3 points to 1 point at the end of the game. Now, when placing these jars, you have to place them in a spot that does not already have a jar, and you're going to need a certain amount of influence. So this one you need at least 1, this one you need at least 3, and of course it gets more expensive, 2 silvers for getting these 3. Now, you're also going to get 1 faith for doing that, so you're going to move that up the attribute track as well. And not only does placing a jar give you 1 faith, it also always allows you to remove 1 suspicion from your board as well. Now, if you want to take the attack action, again, you're going to have to place these 3 workers, and you're going to need strength, but you're going to gain influence. Now, we'll talk about this in just a moment, but you're going to be able to spend silver for moving up strength to attack. This is sort of an optional thing. We'll talk about that now. Now, when attacking, you're looking at the outsiders, which are at the bottom of the right main board, and you're looking at the amount of strength. You need this much strength. Remember, it's your strength attribute on the left side of your player board, plus any possible strength your paladin might bring you this round. Now, if you don't have enough strength to attack a certain card, you can pay 1 silver to get 2 strength. Essentially, if we could only afford this much strength to defeat this card, and when you're attacking, you're only looking at the upper right here. We would say we have 1. If you want to get this one, you can spend a silver to get 1 card to the right, which essentially is 2 strength. If we only had 1, but we wanted to get to this card, we have to pay 2 silver, like that. If we wanted to get this one, but we only had 1, we'd go 1, 2, 3 silver. So that's a quick way of calculating that. You'd spend that to the supply. And then for the one that you attack, it just tells you on the right, all of the attacks are going to gain you influence. So 1 influence and then some other rewards. Now, when you attack these, again, you'll get 1 influence, you'll get a specific reward, and you'll take this card and you'll place it face down alongside your own player board. This will be worth certain things at the end of the game. Keep in mind, if you attack a card with a lightning icon, you immediately get the effect or bonus shown. In this case, you get to move the red strength marker up 2 spots on the attribute track. And keep in mind, you don't refresh those outsiders until the end of the round. They're still missing for other players, possibly. And the last one is convert, that we'll talk about. Again, you need these 3 workers. You're going to need a certain amount of faith, and you're going to gain strength. Now, when you convert outsiders, you're going to be placing them on the bottom of your player board. The first one, you don't have to pay any silver. The second one, you'll have to pay 1 silver, 2 silver, 2 silver, and so on and so forth as you convert more and more outsiders over the course of the game. And since converting, you're going to need the faith, and you're going to need a certain amount of faith attributes depending on which card you're trying to convert. Let's just say we did this one. You would take this card. You're only concerned with the bottom when you convert, and you'll place it underneath your player board. Again, this one costs you nothing. The next one will cost you 1 silver in addition. And this is going to give you points for specific things at the end of the game. For example, if we had attacked this one earlier that we were talking about attacking, we had placed it face down. Remember, it has this icon on it. This says at the end of the game, you're going to get 1 point for every one of these types of outsiders that I attacked. So this is going to be worth a point for me. So I'm going to try to start attacking more of those throughout the game. Now, earlier we talked about the tax area, and when we took a suspicion card after getting a criminal, we got a certain amount of silver. Now remember, anytime in the game where you see you're taking silver that has red like this, you take it from this tax area. Now let's say we had to take this. There's only 1 here. We would take this one. We would take the second one from the normal supply, but anytime this gets emptied, remember the suspicion card would go in front of that player, then the player or players that have the most suspicion cards would have to get an unpaid debt. Again, we talked about how these work earlier, but they take one of those. But they also get to get rid of half of their suspicion cards rounded down, and they would put them in this discarded spot. And you basically take the most recent ones that are on the top of your pile and put them here, again, half rounded down. Now also keep in mind that there's some townsfolk cards that will trigger when Inquisitions happen. That's the icon that is shown here. Like in this case, if you have this townsfolk that you've recruited earlier, when an Inquisition happens, you get to get rid of another suspicion card of yours. And after that's finished, you then refill this tax area with a certain amount of coins depending on the amount of players, just like you did at the beginning of the game. Now in this action phase of the game, again, players are taking turns until they pass, usually when you run out of workers or can't do anything else. Once all players have passed, you'll go to a cleanup phase. Now if there's a card in the rightmost spot of the townfolk area, you will discard it, you'll slide all the other cards down, and you'll fill the rest of the spots up from the draw deck, from right to left. If there's a card in the leftmost spot of the outsider section of the board, you would discard that. You would slide all of these cards down, and you would refill these slots from left to right from the outsider deck. Then you would remove all of the Tavern cards, whether they were used or not, and place them in a face-up discard pile here. Then from the draw pile, you'll flip face-up the amount of cards equal to the number of players plus 1. Then if you happen to be in round 3 or further, these King's Favor cards may have been flipped up, and players might have placed a worker there to gain a benefit. And if so, at this point in the cleanup, you take the workers off here and put them back in the supply, opening them up for new players to play their next round. Then you'd start the next round by passing that first player marker, flipping over the next round's card, etc., etc. And rounds continue like this until the end of the 7th round, then you go to final scoring. And in final scoring, players might be getting points for completing the different king's orders, like having 5 or more walls placed on their player board, or commissioning 5 or more monks out to the main board, or placing 5 or more jars on their player board. You'll be getting points where you are on the attribute track for the 3 different attributes, like 16 points for this influence, 9 points for the faith, and 3 points for the strength. And then you'll get points if you've gone up these different tracks and placed a certain amount of those in order to get points. Like in this case, we've unlocked all the way to here, we'd get a point. Here we've unlocked, here we get 2 points, but we didn't unlock enough in either of those 2 tracks. Sometimes by fortifying walls we get points, so here we have a total of 3. Here we'd look at our converts and see we get points for having attacked certain types. Like in this case, we get 1 point for each of these. So in this case, we just get 1 point for that. You'd also get -3 points for any unpaid debt or +1 point for paid debts. And for each set of 3 in combination of provisions and silvers, you'll also get 1 point. So in this case, for these 3, we have 1 point. At that point, whoever has the most points is the winner. If it's tied, whoever got the most points from these king's orders is the winner. And if it's tied, the player with the least suspicion is the winner. And if still tied, then all tied players share the victory. There is a solo way to play the game, but it's out of scope of this video, so I'll leave this to explore on your own, and you can start doing this on page 26 of the rulebook. Well, I hope this helped you dive right into Paladins of the West Kingdom and get to the fun quicker than you normally would if you had to read the rulebook yourself. Now, if you have any further questions about the rules, I've placed the link below me in the description of this video, and that's the best place to ask them since I'll be notified, but also so will Renegade Game Studios.